This is Reuters.
A weekend of violence in Israel and the West Bank. Israelis on Sunday buried a security officer who died after being shot by a Palestinian on a street in central Tel Aviv a day earlier. The suspected shooter was then shot dead by a municipal patrol officer, according to Tel Aviv's mayor. A statement from the Israeli police said the shooter was a 27-year-old resident of the Palestinian town of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian militant group Hamas praised the attack but did not take responsibility. The U.S. State Department condemned it and called it terrorism. Also on Sunday, Israeli security forces shot dead 3 Palestinian militants in the occupied West Bank, drawing threats of revenge by Palestinian militant factions. The Israeli police said in a statement that special forces had thwarted a group from the Jenin refugee camp on their way to carry out an attack. A spokesperson for Hamas said the shooters would not escape paying the price for their crimes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the security forces. That followed the death of a Palestinian teen Friday who was killed in an attack by Israeli civilians on a Palestinian village in the West Bank. Israeli police detained 2 settlers in the incident near Burqa village. According to Palestinians, they were part of a group that threw rocks, torched cars, and when confronted by villagers, shot a 19-year-old dead and wounded several others. The U.S. condemned this as terrorism as well, in sharpened language that appeared to reflect U.S. frustration with surging violence in the occupied West Bank under Israel's hard-right government. According to Israel's Army radio, the rate of attacks by settlers or their supporters against Palestinians in the West Bank has more than doubled this year compared to 2022.
We are planning to do 150 surgeries across the 5 days. So we're doing about 30 procedures a day. And the criticality of this specialty is that it allows to restore function for these patients. Most of them are using canes, they're in wheelchairs, they can't work, they're in pain and can't provide for their families. Our hope is to restore their function, and in doing so, restore their hope in the fact that they can be also active members of their families and their society.
عندهم الوفد عاملها كان ما قدرت اعملها لانها بتكلف مصاري كثير وما معيش اعملها واصلا انا كانت اصلا قطع في الغضروف الهلالي عشان ما قدرتش اعمله حتى لا ركبت لها تروح لو معي مصاري عملت الغضروف الهلالي وكان ساعتها ما صارش في رجلي زي هيك واني اضيع مفصلي.
Former President Donald Trump appeared a day after his arraignment in Washington, D.C., facing charges of subverting the 2020 election, and told his supporters in Alabama that his legal troubles wouldn't hinder his 2024 campaign.
Every time they file an indictment, we go way up in the polls. We need one more indictment to close out this election. One more indictment, and this election is closed out. Nobody has even a chance.
Speaking at a Republican dinner, Trump called the charges outlined in his indictment an act of desperation by the Biden administration.
The fake charges put forth in their sham indictment are an outrageous criminalization of political speech. That's all it is. You make a statement, oh, we have to indict him because he said we were dishonest, let's indict him. They're trying to make it illegal to question the results of a bad election. It was a very bad election. Everybody knows that.
The former president faces 4 felonies over his efforts to undo his 2020 election loss to Biden, including conspiracy to defraud the U.S., to deprive citizens of their voting rights, and to obstruct an official proceeding. The most serious charge carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. He pleaded not guilty to the charges brought by Special Counsel Jack Smith, who he called on Friday
the deranged sick person.
Then on Friday, Trump pleaded not guilty to 3 new charges relating to his handling of U.S. classified documents after he left the White House in 2021. The new charges against Trump in the document's case include an additional count for unlawful retention of national defense information and 2 more counts of obstruction of justice. US prosecutors on Friday also made a filing flagging a threatening social media post from Donald Trump. The former president wrote, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you," on his Truth Social site, which prosecutors argued it suggests he might intimidate witnesses by improperly disclosing evidence. Trump's other legal woes include charges in the state of New York over hush money payments to a porn star and an ongoing investigation in Georgia on whether he illegally interfered with the state's 2020 election.
Every time the radical left Democrats do this and the Marxist, communist, fascist indict me, I consider it a great badge of honor because I'm being indicted for you. I am being indicted for you. I don't like that deal so much, by the way. I don't like that deal, but that's okay. No, I'm being indicted for you. I'm being indicted because of what we've done, and I'm being indicted because they're afraid of all of us, because we have a movement that's never been seen in the history of our country. Make America Great Again, MAGA. It's never been seen. There's never been anything like this. And never forget, our enemies want to stop us because we are the only ones who can stop them. We're the only ones. And this is why this election is so important. They want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. I'll never let that happen.
Niger closed its airspace on Sunday until further notice, citing the threat of military intervention from the West African regional bloc, after leaders of its recent coup rejected the deadline to reinstate the country's ousted president. Data shown in an animation from flight tracking website flightradar24.com showed that no aircraft were flying over Niger after the announcement. The junta's military spokesperson on Sunday claimed that the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, together with a foreign power and armed terrorist groups, was preparing to attack Niger.
Despite the disapproval of the people of Niger and of ECOWAS of any military intervention in Niger, the planning of this war has been carried out. Pre-deployment of forces to take part in this war have begun in 2 Central African countries.
He added any attempt to violate its national airspace will be met with, quote, an energetic and instantaneous response. Defense chiefs of ECOWAS previously agreed on military action, including when and where to strike, if Niger's detained president Mohamed Bazoum was not released and reinstated by Sunday. The bloc's military threat has triggered fears of further conflict in the region. The possible intervention could also be complicated, as juntas in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso vowed to back the Nigerian coup. U.S. scientists have repeated what appears to be an energy breakthrough, a nuclear fusion reaction that gave off more energy than went into it for a second time after months of near misses. Fusion is a reaction that takes place in the sun, and it's hoped replicating that could one day lead to a source of near limitless and clean energy. Scientists at the California-based Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory say they repeated the feat in an experiment in late July, after they achieved it first in December using lasers. But this time, a lab spokesperson said the scientists were able to produce an even higher energy yield, but that final results are still being analyzed. The experiment is trying to replicate fusion through so-called nuclear ignition. It involves focusing a laser on a target fuel to fuse 2 lighter atoms, such as hydrogen, to form heavier elements, and in the process, release a burst of energy. The December trial generated around 3 megajoules of energy output after the laser delivered a little over 2 megajoules to the target. The U.S. Energy Department called it a major scientific breakthrough decades in the making, adding it will pave the way for advancements in national defense and the future of clean power. While experts outside the lab have applauded the advancements since December, they told Reuters much more work is needed to make fusion power commercially viable.
Saudi Aramco reported a major drop in profit Monday. The energy giant blamed weaker oil prices and thinner margins on refining and chemicals for a near 38% fall in second quarter net profit. It was down to $30 billion for the period to June 30th, though that was still ahead of analyst projections. Most oil majors reported strong or record-breaking earnings last year. Those gains were boosted after Western countries imposed sanctions on Russia over the invasion of Ukraine. That further squeezed an undersupplied global market and led to a surge in crude and natural gas prices. Brent has dropped from $113 a barrel a year ago due to concerns over an economic slowdown and plentiful supplies. But major producer nations have since tried to lift prices again, with oil futures now at their highest since mid-April. That after Saudi Arabia and Russia pledged to keep supplies down for another month to further tighten global markets. Brent was trading around $86 a barrel on Monday. Aramco shares were up around 1% by late morning in Europe.
It is the best day ever, so is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and every day from now until forever.
Barbie has a new reason to celebrate. That's according to Warner Brothers, who announced Sunday the film officially topped $1 billion in box office sales worldwide. The company says it's made $459 million from theaters in the United States and Canada, and another $572 million overseas since its July 21st debut. It also means Greta Gerwig is now the first solo female director to surpass the billion-dollar mark. Distribution heads at Warner Brothers said in a statement, quote, "We're not often rendered speechless by a film's performance, but Barbillion has blown even our most optimistic predictions out of the water." Starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling as Barbie and Ken, the movie sends toymaker Mattel's iconic doll off on an adventure into the real world. Barbie ticket sales rank second this year only to the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which has raked in over $1.3 billion since it opened in April.
The head of the law firm representing 3 dancers suing Grammy-winning singer Lizzo said his clients are ready for trial after the artist denied claims of creating a hostile working environment, including engaging in denigrating behavior and body shaming. Lizzo on Thursday took to her social media pages, calling the accusations unbelievable and outrageous, adding the last few days were gut-wrenchingly difficult. She said the 3 former employees had been told their behavior was inappropriate and unprofessional before they left Lizzo's employment. Nima Rahmani, one of the lawyers representing the dancers, said he was not surprised that Lizzo denied the allegations. He laid out graphic accusations from his clients and said they are prepared to prove them in court.
When you're talking about vaginas and dildos and bananas and dildos and bananas in vaginas, and employees being asked to eat the banana, and another employee, a male employee, getting naked and being whipped by one of the performers. So really sort of inappropriate conduct, and we intend to prove that it happened, and really no one should be subject to it in any workplace environment. I was shocked.
The lawsuit also alleged harassment based on sex, religion, race, and disability.
Rich and powerful entertainers can sometimes treat people unfairly and unlawfully. And it started with the Me Too movement. It doesn't matter if it's a rich and powerful man. Sometimes it's a rich and powerful woman, and they think that the law doesn't apply to them because of who they are or because of their fame and stature. And these laws are intended to protect the little guy or the little girl from really a disparity in power.
Rahmani said the dancers are excited to tell their story publicly. In denying the accusations, Lizzo wrote, "I'm very open with my sexuality and expressing myself, but cannot accept or allow people to use that openness to make me out to be something I am not."
Pope Francis made fresh comments about the LGBT community's place in the Catholic Church on Sunday. During a Catholic youth summit in Portugal over the weekend, Francis said the church was, quote, "open to everyone." Reporters later asked him on Sunday whether that was incoherent, since some sacraments are barred to some people. That seemed to refer to women being barred from becoming priests and gay people not being allowed to marry. Francis responded,
"The church is open to everyone. Then there are rules that regulate life within the church, and someone who is inside and follows the rules cannot administer sacraments. This to say it in a simplified way, like you said. This does not mean it is closed. Everyone meets God in their own way within the church, and the church is mother, and it guides everyone in their own way.
The church teaches that same-sex attraction is not sinful, but same-sex acts are. Since the start of his papacy, the 86-year-old pope has faced a delicate balance between appealing to more liberal believers without upsetting conservatives, including giving more high-ranking roles to women, who the church teaches cannot become priests because Jesus chose only men as his apostles. While he supports legislation that gives some same-sex couples rights in areas like pensions, he has stopped short of changing teachings that urge chastity for those with same-sex attraction. Francis's comments came as he took questions during his customary freewheeling post-trip press conference, as he flew back to Rome from the Youth Festival in Portugal.
Ukrainian intelligence released a video of a sea drone attack on a Russian tanker near the strategic bridge linking Russia to the annexed peninsula of Crimea. The source said the video was filmed on Saturday. Reuters was only able to identify the ship from the silhouette. The writing on the bridge also matched file imagery. According to Russian-installed officials in Crimea, no one was hurt, but the Crimean bridge and ferry transport were suspended for several hours. Russian media said the SIG vessel, approaching the Kerch Strait linking the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, was hit by Ukrainian drones. Ukraine's Interfax agency, citing an unnamed Ukrainian security service source, also said Ukraine's navy was behind the attack with drones in its territorial waters. Kiev seldom claims responsibility for attacks inside Russia or on Russian-controlled territory in Ukraine. Vasyl Mayuk, head of Ukraine's SBU security service, did not directly say that Ukraine had attacked the vessel, but he commented that any incident with Russian ships or the Crimean bridge was, quote, an absolute logical and efficient step towards the enemy. Saturday's attack came a day after a Russian warship was damaged at a Navy base in Novorossiysk. It was the first time the Ukrainian Navy has projected its powers so far from its shores. Russia's Novorossiysk Maritime Rescue Coordination Center was quoted by the IRA news agency as saying there was no fuel spill from the SIG, as the ship had been carrying only technical ballast. It said water had stopped pouring into the SIG and recovery work was underway with 2 tugboats nearby. The SIG had been supplying oil to Russian troops in Syria, according to Vladimir Rogov, a Russian-appointed official in Ukraine's southeastern region of Zaporizhia. The United States imposed sanctions on the tanker and its owner, St. Petersburg-based Transpetrochart, in 2019 for helping provide jet fuel in Syria.
Iran has equipped its Revolutionary Guards Navy with drones and 600-mile-range missiles, Iranian news agencies reported on Saturday. This comes just days after an announcement by the U.S. that it could soon offer to put armed sailors and Marines on commercial ships traveling through the Gulf's Strait of Hormuz, following Iran's seizure and harassment of vessels. The Strait of Hormuz is between Iran and Oman. The Revolutionary Guards Navy commander Ali Reza Tangziri told state TV that the new missiles had better precision as well as longer range. Last month, the Pentagon said it would send additional fighter jets along with a warship to the Middle East in a bid to monitor key waterways in the region. Tehran usually says detained vessels have committed shipping violations. Some have been released only after foreign countries have freed detained Iranian ships. Last month, the U.S. Navy said it intervened to prevent Iran from seizing 2 commercial tankers in the Gulf of Oman. Since 2019, there have been a series of attacks on shipping in strategic Gulf waters at times of tension between the United States and Iran. With the 2015 Iran nuclear deal effectively dead, Iran's relations with the West have deteriorated over the last year, leading Washington and its allies to look for ways to de-escalate tensions and a way to revive some kind of nuclear limit.
Recuperali tutti.
Forza, bravissimi.
A police convoy carried Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan from his home in Lahore on Saturday. That's according to a video released by his party PTI. He was arrested after a court sentenced him to 3 years in prison for illegally selling state gifts.
जब तक ये पैगाम आप तक पहुंचेगा.
Khan's denied wrongdoing, and in this pre-recorded video address also released by his party, he asked his supporters to peacefully protest. "I have only one appeal," he said. "Don't sit silently at home. I am struggling for you and the country," he added. The arrest potentially bars the opposition leader from contesting an upcoming election. 70-year-old Khan is a former cricket star who went on to forge a political career and who was Prime Minister from 2018 to 2022. Legal experts say the guilty verdict could eliminate Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's greatest rival in a national election expected to be held in November. The arrest is the latest in a series of blows that have weakened Khan's political standing after he fell out with Pakistan's powerful military and his party splintered. Police surrounded Khan's residence in Lahore, but there were no immediate signs of unrest in the hours after his arrest, unlike last May. Khan's political party said in a statement it had already filed another appeal to the Supreme Court earlier on Saturday. Lawyers for one of the main parties in Pakistan's ruling coalition cheered as the court handed down the sentence. The conviction came a day after Pakistan's High Court temporarily halted the district court trial. It was not immediately clear why the trial had proceeded, despite the High Court decision. The country's information minister said that Khan's arrest followed a full investigation and proper legal proceedings in a trial court.
The World Scout Jamboree in South Korea will go on despite calls for it to be cancelled due to extreme heat. That's according to the country's Prime Minister Han Duk-soo on Saturday.
Regarding the operation plan of the Jamboree, the representatives of each country held a meeting today and decided to continue the event.
Tens of thousands of scouts aged between 14 to 18 years old had flocked to Saemangeum on South Korea's west coast. Temperatures have hit over 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Hundreds of participants have already fallen ill due to the searing temperatures, prompting complaints from parents over the safety of their children. Kristen Sayers from the U.S. state of Virginia said her 17-year-old son Corey's dream to take part in the Jamboree at a cost of $6,500 had turned into a, quote, nightmare.
It sounds like the problems with this go way beyond the heat. There's not enough food, there's not enough water.
The government promised more water trucks, air-conditioned spaces and medics in an attempt to save the event, which is set to run till August 12. But the organisers suffered a fresh blow on Saturday when the US and Singapore decided to follow British Scouts' lead by moving elsewhere. As of Saturday, there had been over 42,000 participants from over 150 countries camping at the site. In an effort to calm the situation, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol ordered officials to roll out tour programs showcasing Korean culture and nature in Seoul and other cities and make it available for all Scouts.
We pledge
Some countries, including the Philippines and Argentina, have said they would remain at the campsite despite challenges from extreme weather.
Some improvements.
The US contingent will take part in a Jamboree program on Saturday before moving to US Army Garrison Humphreys near the Jamboree site on Sunday. That's according to an email sent to parents that cited the difficulties posed by the, quote, ongoing extreme weather. Britain, the largest grouping at the Jamboree, said on Friday they were moving to hotels in Seoul for the rest of their stay to alleviate pressure on the site. They were seen leaving the campsite on Saturday morning.
Is breathing okay?
This Amazonian rodent could be yet another victim of mercury contamination. Inside a camping tent in the middle of the Peruvian jungle, scientists are trying to determine just that.
We started doing on-site testing for mercury because we are in a region where there's a lot of gold mining extraction.
Tests like this one are providing the first extensive indications that mercury from illegal gold mining in the Amazon rainforest is contaminating terrestrial mammals, from rodents to ocelots to titi monkeys. Peruvians have mined gold for centuries. Over the past 15 years, the southeastern region of Madre de Dios has become an epicenter of small-scale mining, where some 46,000 miners are searching for gold along riverbanks. The vast majority of them operate illegally in protected areas or informally with little regulatory oversight. Some researchers say the miners often disregard environmental laws. The miners also use toxic liquid mercury to separate precious metal from sediment. Wildlife biologist Gideon Erkenswick.
And so mercury in this process runs off into the environment or gets burned and then becomes an aerosol that goes all over the place.
Animals can ingest mercury through their diet, from the water they drink, or the air they breathe. Reuters accompanied the researchers in Madre de Dios and reviewed their previously unreported findings. Since 2018, the team from the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, the California nonprofit Field Projects International, and Peruvian partner Conservación Amazonica have collected samples from more than 2,600 animals, representing at least 260 species.
The main animal groups that we work with include birds, bats, non-human primates, small animals, so rodents and marsupials, some medium-sized mammals, and amphibians and reptiles. From each of those capture events, we collect a range of non-lethal tissues, buccal swabs, skin swabs, nail clippings, a single blood draw, and then we release the animals.
Of the 330 primate samples tested so far, virtually all showed mercury contamination. How this will affect their health is not clear. Veterinarian toxicologist Caroline Moore.
There is a general concern that, if the mercury levels get high enough and are consistent enough and prevent animals from reproducing successfully, or if they have a baby, that the baby cannot successfully grow up to be an adult.
The rapid expansion of mining operations in the Amazon rainforest is seen by regional governments as an environmental and health threat. The Peruvian government estimates that illegal miners dump about 180 metric tons of mercury in Madre de Dios annually. In 2019, the government declared a state of emergency in that region and deployed 1,500 police and soldiers to crack down on illegal mining. The Environment Ministry did not respond to Reuters' questions about mercury contamination. In the years to come, scientists hope to create a long-term data set in Peru and other mining hotspots to understand how mercury could be affecting mammals globally.
We're wondering, Are the birds exposed? If so, how? And if the birds are exposed, who else is exposed? Are the humans exposed? Are these, megafauna also exposed? And what does it all mean? And so we're slowly building up that picture. And what we build up here can then be applied other places in the world where mining and mercury exposures are a concern.
Another one further down, I don't know.
Oh, poor babies. Check it. Oh.
There's another one further down, I don't know.
Oh, poor babies. Check it. Oh.
There's
Mong Song-ka seemed like an unlikely face for the war for democracy in Myanmar. In his past life, he was a peaceful anti-government poet. Now he's leading an armed militia against the state. In video provided to Reuters, he appears to be in a jungle camp talking to rebel fighters of the Burma People's Liberation Army, or BPLA, an army he leads after founding it 2 years ago. The 30-year-old says his life now involves negotiating arms deals and dodging airstrikes.
We chose to take up arms as we had no other choice. The situation demanded it, and I would say that this is most unfortunate for us. Nobody wants to do this. We were forced to choose this path.
It wasn't always so. Like many others, Mong took to the streets to protest the junta that ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's government in February 2021. He went into hiding after a warrant was placed on his head. He lost faith in peaceful protests and founded the BPLA. It was helped by his track record as an anti-government activist before the coup. Mong was known popularly throughout the country as the penis poet. He was jailed in 2015 for writing a satirical poem about his penis tattooed with a portrait of then-President Thein Sein. After that, he kept writing and became more politically active. He advocated for equality for the country's many minorities and against the imprisonment of journalists, including 2 Reuters reporters who were detained for covering the Rohingya massacre. When he's not busy on the front lines now, Mong says he's still composing poems.
I wrote a poem about love last week, and it turned out to be about a soldier in the jungle missing his girlfriend, who was left behind in the city. It would be easy for my poems to be all about the revolution, but I am making conscious efforts to not do that.
The junta, which has charged Mong Song-ka with sedition, says armed groups that oppose it are terrorists who sow chaos and kill civilians. It did not respond to Reuters' requests for comment about the story. Mong says he worries about potential retribution against his family.
All of us, myself included, have no plans to return to our former lives. No matter what happens to our parents, as a commander who must lead my comrades, I have to keep that in mind.
He adds that after the junta has been ousted, he wants to open a bar for young veterans as they have missed many opportunities to experience joy in their youth.
They came to you for help, and how do I help you? And I don't care if you were doing drugs and you left your kids. Yes, that is wrong, but that's not the point right now. The point is I need to go find you and bring you back home.
Detective Kathleen Lucero knows members of her Native American community well. Her New Mexico village of Isla Pueblo is home to more than 3,000 indigenous people. As the village's chief criminal investigator, Lucero's made missing persons her priority. She's fighting to stop her people from becoming part of an epidemic of missing and murdered indigenous women and relatives in the United States.
It breaks my heart. It gets to me. It gets to the bottom of my stomach. It's really
heartbreaking to know that something is happening in their family. And how do we help them?
Factors ranging from poverty and a history of colonial oppression make Native Americans disproportionately at risk of going missing. But finding them is often not the priority among U.S. and tribal law enforcement. Police officials and policymakers told Reuters a jurisdictional maze and lack of resources have contributed to an estimated 4,200 indigenous cases remaining unresolved. The head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs acknowledged his department's lack of resources, but said it was trying to create better coordination between other agencies. Some native police, like Lucero, are taking matters into their own hands. Since 2015, Lucero has handled 8 missing people cases, with 7 people found alive and 1 still missing.
I come from a very traditional family. My family name is well known, and so I have more of that recognition because of my family name, because of my family ties to traditions, and so I use that to my advantage.
Reuters spoke to families who reported inaction by police agencies over their missing loved ones. Some say police routinely blame missing Native American women for their own disappearance due to factors such as substance abuse. Lucero agrees. She says police judging victim relatives missing.
What if it was me? What if it was me? And for me as an investigator, again, that sensibility that I'm a mother, I'm an aunt, I'm a sister, and a family member, a cousin, and just because that person on the other side is not a direct connect to me, they're still somehow connected to me, and how do I help them?
Fiery protests have erupted in the Muslim world after anti-Islam activists in Denmark and Sweden recently staged public events where they burned or damaged copies of the Quran, the Islamic holy book. Reuters has elected not to show images of sacred texts being burned. The governments of both Denmark and Sweden have condemned the burnings and said they are considering new laws that could stop such acts. But that is not so easy, as critics point to freedom of speech and expression protected in their constitutions. At least 3 of the acts in Sweden over the past month have been led by Salwan Momika, a refugee from Iraq who says he's protesting against the whole institution of Islam. And far-right activists in neighboring Denmark began demonstrating against what it sees as Islamization of Nordic societies. At least 10 copies of the Quran have been burned in Denmark over the past week.
Welcome to
Danish-Swedish far-right activist Rasmus Paludan, the man behind sporadic Quran burnings since 2017, has carried out even more in both countries this year. He says he's appalled by Turkey's opposition to Sweden's bid to join NATO. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has said he will work to get Sweden's application to join NATO approved. But first, the Quran burnings must stop.
Ülkemizin büyükelçiliği önünde.
It is very obvious those who allow such blasphemy in front of our embassy can no longer expect our support for their NATO membership.
Bizden herhangi bir hayır haklık bekleyemeyecekleri açıktır.
Protests have been far and wide, with the Swedish and Danish flags set on fire in retaliation. In January, demonstrators in Istanbul chanted, "We are not only going to burn the flag, but Sweden itself. Where is the president of this country?" On July 20th, hundreds of protesters, angry over a planned Quran burning, stormed and set alight the Swedish embassy in Baghdad. On that day, Iraq expelled the Swedish ambassador. Across the Middle East, Swedish and Danish ambassadors have been called in for rebukes and warnings. Intentionally burning the Quran is seen by Muslims as a blasphemous act worthy of severe punishment, as they consider the Quran to be the literal word of God. Both Sweden and Denmark say they are examining ways to legally limit burnings to de-escalate tensions with Muslim nations. But as of now, neither country has the legislation in place to forbid burning Qurans.
These airless tires were invented by NASA for roving around on the moon. But now an LA-based company is bringing the technology back down to Earth in the hopes of making punctures a thing of the past. According to the Smart Tire Company, the tires are airless, durable, and will never go flat, making them more sustainable and durable than traditional all-rubber tires.
So you have these little spring coils going around, and you have these radial elements.
The tires have a springy mesh design made of shape memory alloy, or SMA.
And dispenses it in evenly, which is unlike any other tire. What makes shape memory alloys so special is it's like a super elastic material. It's a very flexible, lightweight metal that's elastic like rubber, but strong like titanium. So you can actually deflect a tire way down to the rim, and it will just always bounce back to its original shape. So you're able to use this as a structural element in a tire now, so you don't need any pressurized air. So that means an airless tire, punctures don't matter, it will never ever get a flat, so your tire can last the life of your vehicle.
Despite immense advances in car technology, Cole says tires haven't changed much in over 100 years. But with regulators turning their scrutiny to tire pollution, tire makers are under pressure to practically reinvent the wheel. Scrap tires are a major environmental problem worldwide due to their bulk and the chemicals they can release. When tires make contact with the road, tiny particles are abraded and emitted. And ironically, that problem is set to become bigger with electric vehicles, given the extra weight of EVs due to their batteries. The Smart Tire Company hopes to offer a solution while tapping into an industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
This will last much longer than your average tire. So the one key element is not only no flats and it's more sustainable because we use less rubber, but you won't have to throw the whole tire away when the tread wears out. It's going to be one of the first retreadable tires.
On Smart tires, the only rubber part is the tread, the thin, sheath-like outer part that gives grip on the road, which can be replaced without throwing away the whole tire, as is currently the case.
So the only thing you have to change is the tread, which is far more cost-effective than throwing out the whole tire and getting a whole new set of tires.
The company says tens of thousands of people worldwide have already joined the waiting list for their first commercial product.
See the shape memory alloy?
An airless, smart bicycle tire, set to launch in spring 2024.
From inflation data in the US to stimulus fatigue in China, these are the top business and finance stories to watch in the week ahead. US economic data has been positive, and the June inflation reading of 3% was the smallest annual increase in over 2 years. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has said reducing inflation will likely take a period of below-trend growth. That makes Thursday's Consumer Price Index report for July critical. Lower numbers could increase the likelihood of a pause in rate rises. China's stumbling post-health crisis economy needs help, but the scope of what Beijing has offered so far has underwhelmed the market. In some rare good news, a private survey showed services activity picked up in July. The question now is whether trade numbers on Tuesday and inflation data on Wednesday can provide any additional cheer. The UK economy is still dodging a recession for now. Part of that comes down to resilient consumers. The other part is the time it takes for interest rates to filter through to borrowing costs, like mortgages. The Bank of England raised rates to a 15-year high of 5.25% this month. GDP figures for the last 3 months, due on Friday, will provide more insight on how inflation and wage growth are stacking up.
16-year-old Ilona Paveluk is describing the moment she returned home to Ukraine. She spent nearly a year and a half locked away, hiding under Russian occupation. The Russians came to their village near the Dnipro River at the start of the invasion last year. She says she couldn't leave the house, not even to the park just outside their home.
Я не навчаюся до сих пір, я не закінчила школу, у мене нема документів, ну я вважаюся як тупа, виходить. Ось, і я нікуди не могла їздити, батько сильно переживав за мене, каже, що ці росіяни, вони там, типу, знасилують мене, там б'ють, ну бувало вже таке там.
Her father died of AIDS last month, leaving her and her younger brother Maxime orphans, and making them part of a particularly vulnerable group amid the war. Orphans are the most urgent cases for groups like Save Ukraine, a charity that maintains an underground network inside occupied parts of Ukraine and Russia itself.
Повернути дітей-сиріт набагато складніше, тому що росіяни, вони призначають законного представника цій дитині. Законного це в лапках, тому що це їй представник на заміну того представника закону, який був на контрольованій території. Після захоплення вони і викрадення, вони призначають цього представника або влаштовують прийомну родину, або заклад, тому далі вже ніякі домовленості не діють. І цю дитину забрати дуже важко.
President Vladimir Putin claims to have annexed Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine. As a result, Moscow says it has gathered hundreds of thousands of orphans and vulnerable children there, taking them back to Russia. Ukraine says the practice amounts to forced deportation to erase their Ukrainian identity. That's a crime against humanity, something Putin has already been indicted for by the International Criminal Court in The Hague.
Знала, що треба їхати, тому що вони мене заберуть на Росію, дадуть мені гражданство і відправлять в якийсь дитдом російський. І знаєте, коли я уїхала, вони десь через день чи два приїхали за мною, а мене вдома не було. Представляєте, як це трапилось би, якщо б я не поїхала?
Ilona and Maxime were able to escape with the help of Save Ukraine, but the journey wasn't simple. They traveled through Russian-held territory, to Russia itself, then to Belarus, until they finally made it back into Ukraine. Details of the journey are kept confidential to protect activists along the route. The pair are living at the group's hostel in Kyiv until they can sort their paperwork. Then they'll be off to a relative's living in Slovakia as a refugee. But for now, Ilona is safe and no longer needs to hide.
In the flood-ravaged Chinese city of Zhuozhou, local residents are returning home to take stock of the damage done to their homes and livelihoods. Li Yujie owns a hardware store in the area. She returned home to find her shop inundated by mud and debris, rendering most of her stock unsellable. She says she feels overwhelmed and that it's going to be impossible to clean up. Nearby, this local resident described a similar scene at his home.
As soon as I entered the house, there was over a foot of mud. All the furniture was ruined, completely soaked by floodwater. I estimated the water level to be as high as me, 5'9". That's how high the water was inside the house. The yard is filled with a terrible stench, and along the way, houses have collapsed.
Northeastern China, Beijing and Hebei province have seen heavy rainfall and floods since Typhoon Doksuri made landfall in southern China 2 weeks ago. 14 people were reported to have died over the weekend in the Chinese city of Shulan. State media showed footage of the city completely inundated in floodwater. Supplies were being delivered to residents via helicopter, and desperate residents were being carried to safety on the backs of emergency workers. The deaths in Shulan in northeastern Jilin province add to the more than 20 who died last week in Beijing and Hebei. Authorities have yet to provide an overall death toll for the entire country, but the record-breaking rains have disrupted the lives of millions. China on Sunday allocated an additional $48.8 million to support rescues and house repairs in the flood-hit regions.
For years, Beijing resident Gao enjoyed a big apartment in the city's scenic west and a classy Mercedes-Benz, but he lost it all this week, the result of the most extreme rainfall to hit the Chinese capital in 140 years.
After everything, when we woke up in the morning, we could see that the waters were still flowing normally. Then, all of a sudden, the water went over the bridge. And then suddenly there was a mudslide that blocked the bridge, and then the water slowly seeped over. There used to be a hill here, and a wall, and then the water went over the walls and came in.
Raging water caused by storms that followed Typhoon Doksuri destroyed his ground floor apartment and washed away his car. His front window is now blockaded by tree trunks. Water came up to 12 inches shy of the ceiling, and his living room is filled with debris, forcing him and his wife into temporary housing.
The two of us, my wife and I, we ran for our lives. The tables and chairs were all floating around. It was a squeeze. And the water started to charge. Afterwards, we ran to the second floor and saw the water rushing from the back to the front. All these trees and branches flooded into the living room and blocked the house. There might even be a car in here.
Gao's apartment is in the Mentugu district, about 40 kilometers from the heart of Beijing. That's where the first 2 flood-related casualties were recorded in the city. The area has been the worst hit by flooding. The storm has killed at least 20 people in Beijing and surrounding Hebei province, causing the worst flooding in this area in decades. The rains have since moved on to northeast China. Thousands have been displaced and had their homes ruined. But despite all this, Gao remains optimistic, simply thankful to be alive.
มันก็มีร้อนปีนี้ฝนจะตกอย่างน้อยเห็นไหมใช่ครับปีนี้ฝนจะตกน้อยทุกทีมันจะท่วมกว่านี้แล้วนะปีนี้มันก็ตกแล้วก็ทำมันต้องรอมันเป็นปีนี้เขาว่าอะไรบางคนผู้สูงอายุเพราะว่ามันจะ828แล้วมันจะต้องแรงเดี๋ยวมันจะตกหน่อยแล้วเรามาดูผลเป็นทางการจากคณะกรรมการรายสนามพันครั้ง
Well, I think ice is the most investigated, underappreciated material. I grew up playing with ice. My father was an ice sculptor, and I was born in Japan, lived there till 9, and my family immigrated to Anchorage, Alaska during the early 80s. I also have to say not all Alaskans play with ice, but I did. My father being an ice sculptor, he always kind of kept me in the workplace, and my job was to clean up his scrap ice. My father. Here we are carving with ice that's ephemeral, that doesn't last, it goes away. And I often talk to my clients about the beauty of ice is that it's not what it is, but what it continues to become. There's that constant changing, the transformative element of it, and what's left is the memory of it. My father passed away April 2012. He was 59. You know, after the passing of my father, and he's a man who, you know, really built this place. Really, his spirit is here. You know, I think it's great that every day, there's really not a day where he doesn't come up in a conversation with my crew here.
For me, the best prize is not here. For me, the best prize is waiting me in the forest, because to find, to call, and to actually harvest a mature red stag is for me the gold medal.
This is Reuters.